Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Undercooled, a materials education podcast. Today, we are reporting from sunny San Diego, California. We are live on site at the TMS conference. And at the conference, I bumped into an old friend, Dr. Avi Bregman. The one and only. We're super happy to have you on the show.
Happy to be here.
Great.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into material science and how you ended up wherever it is you are, because we'd like you to tell us that too.
So I get this question sometimes too, from college students and people who are thinking about graduate school. And I always ask them if they want the truth or the lie. Most of the time they ask for the truth. So when I graduated college, I didn't know what material science was. I was a chemistry major at Haverford College. And I knew there were two things I wanted when I left college. I didn't want to move back home, in my parents' basement, and I wanted to do work that I thought was interesting. I interviewed with a bunch of chemical companies out in Delaware and in Philly, and the work sounded really boring. I was going to be doing the same reaction every day, maybe scaling up. And so I decided to apply for grad school, and I was originally going to apply for chemistry, and my advisor very bluntly sat me down and said, here's the deal. You can go do a chemistry Ph.D., you might have a hard time finding work. But if you go do material science, you'll have an easier time finding work. And if you do material science and engineering, you're on average going to make 15% more than just the material science degree. So I said, that sounds great. So I applied for material science and engineering, and I ended up at the University of Michigan. And I started out in a computational chemistry lab. I really didn't like it, and I almost dropped out. And then my graduate advisor, Dr. Alan Taub, took me by the arm and he said, hey, don't drop out, switch to my lab. So he picked me up and he gave me sort of free rein to pick my project and start something new because he was a new professor, and that's how I ended up getting my degree. I then went on to do a postdoc at Sandia National Labs where I met Dr. Larico Treadwell, who I now run another side project with, which we'll talk about a little later. I then took a quick break from the lab. I made a mistake of taking the first job I could get out of my postdoc because at that time the only thought in my head was I'm so sick and tired of research. I got to go do something else. So I took a year break and I worked for KLA Tencor at their new Ann Arbor office when they opened that fancy place. And I was an application engineer there for a year. And really didn't like that, right? All the things I loved about lab, the creativity, the chance to do new things, the excitement, being in a building, talking to people about cool things and meeting people, none of that's there, right? As an application engineer, I felt like a kind of like a glorified like call center rep, Hey, we're trying to run a process, it doesn't work, what do I do? And you turn it on and off, you press this button. Okay. So yeah, it didn't really work for me, and it took me shattering my collarbone and recovering at home for my mom to say, Avi, you don't have to stay there, right? You can switch jobs. So I ended up talking to my sister who was living in Baltimore, and she had a friend at the applied physics lab, and they helped me, told me a little about it. I applied, I got an interview, and now I'm at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, where I am the senior scientist, also section supervisor for materials discovery, working on really anything I can get my hands on and anything my program manager lets me work on. So here at TMS, I'm talking about some work I did on evaluating the 3D printability of lunar regolith in vacuum environments, so coming up with some cool testing methods to figure out how we could do more simulated 3D printing of regolith. Spoiler alert, if you want to come to my talk, it didn't work, but it's still still an interesting story.
So you're saying we're not just going to be extracting elemental silicon and making ingots on the moon and just building solar cells in situ?
Not quite yet.
So what were you doing with the regolith?
Oh, so we had a project at the lab where they were trying to do called Element, and it was all about using some of our new AI guided tools, AI materials discovery, to say, hey, we've got the thing about the moon is we know what's up there, right? We know what's there, and a
Yeah.
lot of the problems we're trying to do here is figure out like how do we get the things we need from it and recombine. And we have a decent handle on like oxygen extraction, right? There's Blue Origin, right, is sending something up supposedly on the Artemis mission. They have a big, what are they using? Just like electrolysis, basically, making a big soup, and they're going to pull all the oxygen out. But we tried to take on this problem of, hey, if we can do some smart AI materials discovery, discover some new alloys based on what we have up there, does that give us a better direction to say, okay, now that we know what we want based on some score related to ductility and hardness, because I might need it for a structure, I might need it for a shovel, kind of building out that portfolio, now I can figure out how to make it. And so they were going after direct energy deposition, so using that as a tool. So we can tune compositions and say, hey, I'm going to assume I have a big vat full of silicon feedstock and a big vat full of titanium feedstock, and I'm going to have a printer up there, and I can control my compositions and print anything I want, in some direction.
So these are mostly for things that would be used up there, because
Yes.
of course it's very expensive to bring it back.
Yes.
So that's kind of what Northrop Grumman knew,
right.
because if you pull up all this regolith and have good uses for it on the moon, bringing back a kilogram of helium-3 is very light,
Yes.
but it's hard to get that out.
Yeah. But so I was watching them do this process, and I said, well, this is very cool that you were able to make a DED something in an air, but we always at APL, when I'm tasked with kind of coming up with projects, they like us to start with the phrase "imagine a world," right? So we're always trying to imagine a world, and I made this. I used ChatGPT, and I made a picture of a little robot out on the planet, right? A humanoid robot, and it had a laser pen in its hand, and it's building me a little structure out of something. I said, yeah, I mean, this would be cool, but we're probably not going to necessarily have the environments that we have on Earth. Let's see if we can do some simulated 3D printing in vacuum.
Yeah.
So I took a vacuum chamber, I retrofitted it with some of the things we needed, and I stuck it inside of our DED chamber and put a little bed of lunar regolith simulant in there and tried to see if I could make a structure. And short answer is no. Like the heat conduction and thermal transfer is it just doesn't work. At least in our setup right now, but it gives us some directions to go towards.
Because there's always a way.
Right, there's always a way. But I found one way that didn't work, which is as good as finding
Absolutely.
one way that does work.
Absolutely. So you like your job now?
I do like my job. I think there are things that are very frustrating about it, and I've had a unique perspective and trajectory in my career where I've gotten to see what does it look like to do research in academia? What does it look like to do research at a national lab? What does it look like to do work at industry?
Right.
And then now I'm at APL is a university associated research center,
Right.
so it's not strictly a national lab. We function a little bit differently. There's different pots of money we can go after. The way our funding is structured is different. So our approach to research is a little different. And the types of sponsors we go after are different. So there are frustrations at every level, but I do love the parts of my job when I'm not doing paperwork, that I'm talking about science, and I get to play, and I get to come up with crazy ideas, and eventually somebody says, oh, that's cool, write a white paper on it. And so I do like my job, yeah.
Do you ever collaborate with Northrop Grumman?
Yeah, so we have tons of collaborations. We do a lot of collaboration with Lockheed, a lot of collaboration with Raytheon. We collaborate with universities. So
if you ever get a chance to go to, Northrop Grumman's headquarters is right by Dulles Airport. And do you know what street their headquarters is on?
No.
Warp Drive.
Ah,
look at them go.
Yeah, because there's also a huge Northrop Grumman facility in Baltimore too. So we're always trying to talk.
Well,
to
they
them.
build their satellites there, but of course they've got places all over the country.
Yeah, no, I personally I'm not as involved in that work. I tend to get most of my funding from like the NRO, NSF, and some other internal proposals right now. So that's where I'm kind of going after. Yeah, it's very cool though.
So what did you do your PhD on?
So I did my PhD on polymer composites for EMI shielding. It's in the University of Michigan archive. You can go and read. It's a nice light read as far as theses go. I think it was clocked in at around 63 pages or so, 70 pages.
Really?
Yeah, Dr. Taub said...
That's good. That's all you need.
You can write that in an afternoon.
He said, I don't want to read a super long thing. Tell me the story, tell me your results, and if they're good, we're good to go.
Right.
So we were looking at trying to use tackling the problem of EMI shielding. People are going after polymer composites. They're using things like foams to create really good impedance match at the surface, but then have lots of pores and things for an electromagnetic wave to dissipate as it travels through. So tackling absorption.
Right.
But the trade space or the design space for going after foams is really large and hard to do, right? Because I could foam 6 million ways to Sunday, vary my pressure, vary my temperature. I'm still only going to be selecting discrete points on what is probably a continuous design space.
Right.
So if I miss something, right, if I'm off by a PSI, I might have missed the best thing.
Sure.
So I said, all right, can we do a little bit of computational modeling first, try to do something more periodic, optimize there, let's open up avenues for 3D printing, additive manufacturing, because I'm doing something periodic, something predictable. So I came up with the design I needed. I developed the material that I wanted to print with. So I had some intrinsic electromagnetic properties that I was working with. So then I had a nice little summary at the end where I said, hey, here's my simulations based on my electromagnetic properties. Here's my stuff I've made that has a variable periodic geometry that I made with a novel material. Look, they match up. This is now a pathway forward for design of EMI shielding materials.
And it got you into 3D printing, and you're still doing.
Yeah, it got me into 3D printing. It got me into nanoparticle design. It got me a flavor of understanding what goes into computational simulation.
Right.
Kind of then, built upon some of that work, doing more composites work in my postdoc, and I've sort of built a career of just trying to. My postdoc PI gave me good advice, which was every year come up with a proposal in a new subject area. Now, whether or not that's good advice, some people might disagree, right? I think professors who build a career on like one subject, right? You're the subject matter expert in that. You're so good at it. They probably disagree with me.
Yeah, but they're boring.
But in the national lab in UARC space, right,
Sure.
where we're responding so quickly to not just the changing needs of our own organization, we're subject to the changing needs of the administration and new priorities that are coming online. And if I'm not equipped to be an agile researcher, that when they release a call that says, hey, we need to operationalize Space Force, I got to say, oh, actually, I did something a year ago on an unrelated topic that I can pull into that.
I think you got great advice.
Yeah.
I would totally agree. I mean, I've changed my research
Yeah.
direction so many times, but I love it. That's what makes it exciting. I don't want to do the same thing every day.
Right.
It's that's why I love being a scientist.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the advice comes through just in your own trajectory. You started as chemistry, and then you went to material science. You found yourself doing electricity and magnetism in materials, and just one thing leads to another. And if you follow these opportunities as they arise, you build out a really robust portfolio of capabilities, and then you can respond to whatever comes up whenever it comes up.
Yeah. And it's fun. That's the biggest part.
Yeah, that's why I love doing these MVP projects, because it's like these crazy things they throw at you. And sure, let's go do it. And, I've done polyurethanes for football helmet to shield concussions with a football helmet company. We did a project with, and I'm not a polymer person, but we did a project with the Pop-Tart division of Kellogg's, who wanted to 3D print icing on Pop-Tarts for a marketing scheme. So they have these at like a zoo, and grandparents would bring their grandchildren, and they they draw a picture on a phone, send it to the printer, and it would make it in icing. And they tried to do it because, there used to be, remember all those things like Foodini, and there was going to be 3D printed, and it never happened. Do you know why it never happened?
I actually don't know.
Because they all used powders. And so all the food was toxic because it was too much surface area. And they never recovered. But icing is hard to 3D print because when you put a pixel down, it goes, and that's all the TG, right? It's the glass transition temperature. So you just have to tune a icing formulation to have a little more viscosity at room temperature, so you could do it. And our design requirement was it just couldn't poison the kids.
Didn't have to taste good.
Didn't have to taste good.
Can poison the adults though.
Right.
Well, they've already served their functions.
And so we were able to make it work by putting in Crisco into the ice cream.
Nice.
Disgusting, but it worked, and it was really fun.
Did they roll it out?
We did a demo at the fair And we had more people at our table than anyone else. No one ate it, but you could see, we bought a little kit to make a 3D printer, and they make extruders that you can use.
People love the food stuff. We had a project at the lab called Food from Air. Not a project I was on, but they were tasked with the idea that like you have a forward operating warfighter or a base or something. The more you can draw from the environment, the better you can do. Right? In the olden days, they do this by just raising fields as they went by. But why? Let's use technology, right? And so if you can take the building blocks that are in air, nitrogen, oxygen, all these things, and trick a microbe into a biological pathway that turns out sugar, that's food from air.
Yeah.
And so they did this thing, and they made we had a big event where we were doing these like demos and expos, and it's always a fun little party. And they made a vat of this stuff, and they put rum in it, so people had
it's like a good party.
Yeah, it was like tactical shots made with food from air. It was
oh, that's great.
So this connects to a topic that we should probably talk about at some point, which is just public engagement and science communication, right? And there's always this tendency in academia to live in your silo and write your expert content for the other 4 experts in the world who will read it. And that's not how we make impacts, more broadly speaking, right? And when you're trying to get grants, obtain funding, demonstrate that your work is meaningful, it's all about communicating with the public. So what's been your experience in working on, public communication projects or interests that you have in that area?
Yeah, man, you're talking to me at a good time. I actually, I made a new professor friend at this workshop, or not workshop, at TMS. It's a small little conference. And he was like, I want to collaborate with you. I want to find ways to work with APL. And I said, great, tell me what you're working on. And tell me all this great stuff. Oh, I got this equipment. I'm looking at very specific curves and data and pulling them out. Okay, great, awesome. What am I using that for? What's the impact there? What am I going to work on? Blank eyes, right? The thing that is I have had to learn really the hard way by working at places like APL. If you can't communicate why what you're doing matters, it's very hard to get funding, and it's very hard to get people to engage. I have a few things I like to do when I'm doing presentations. I call it the does my mom get it test. So I'll always give her my talks, and say, hey, look what I'm doing, and if at the end she goes, oh, okay, I get it. It's like, okay, right? I if I needed to talk to somebody in the public about what I'm doing, they can get it. They're not going to say, well, why am I wasting my tax dollars on that, right? It might not be an immediate impact to them, but they can see how it affects the global space. And this is actually a subject that I am actively working on trying to solve. I got a grant to put on a conference in DC called From Laboratory to Launchpad. And we are working on trying to educate academics on if you are proposing work, you need to be thinking now about how that work translates, how it moves forward. And so over the course of a day where we're going to have some keynotes talking about successful journeys from, hey, I had an idea and here's how I commercialized it. Hoping to get some input from some government folks on, hey, here's how we need you to be thinking about your research because we need ideas yesterday. There are problems we are trying to solve that we are so behind on. We don't have time to do a lot of the basic research anymore. So we're doing some keynotes. We're going to have workshops that follow that full track of, hey, you've got an idea. How do you talk about it? Hey, you want to get funding. What's the way you need to write about your research to get federal funding agencies engaged? If you have a good research, do you know what IP is? Do you know how to handle that work? Do you know the types of protections you can get from different types of IP? And then say you have something good, what are your options for translating that? How do you get this out into the world? And then we're going to cap off the day with actually some live pitch sessions. So not technical talks, but giving researchers a chance to present their work like they were on Shark Tank. And we've actually engaged with a number of VC folk in the DC area to come serve on that panel to say, hey, if you were going to present this to us, here's what you need to change. If you're going to be looking at this, we need you to do a TEA, a techno-economic analysis, right? And so I am trying to find a way to make this change and get people to start thinking about research differently.
Who is your audience? Who are the people who will come to
this? So we're going to be blasting it out to academics in the DMV area. Whether
The D.
Oh, the DM. I forget that people don't know this term. It's
DC, Virginia,
DC,
Maryland.
Virginia, Maryland. We got into an argument last night with some other people. I was like, oh, the DMV. And they said, that's where you go for cars. And I said, actually, no, in Maryland, it's the MVA, right? We have it differently. Because I think they like this regional term. So we're going to start, this grant is internally funded by Hopkins.
Okay.
So I'm collaborating with some people in the business school and the engineering school to put this on. And just for sake of how much money we have for this thing, we're going to make it easy for people because if you can drive in, take the train in, we want you there. So we'll be targeting all sorts of universities in the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine especially younger faculty will be coming faculty from schools where they don't have a lot of research, but we want to build it up.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not going to get, high-powered faculty who think they know all this already.
Yeah. And I mean, I think maybe part of the hope is that there is a high-powered faculty member who, I'd be curious to hear your take on it because I know you're a long-tenured professor, you're very successful in what you've done, but the research funding landscape has changed.
Oh, yeah.
And the old ways don't necessarily work anymore. And so you might have been the best of the best, but if you want to keep doing what you're doing, you have to adapt and you have to grow. So maybe now we can get these people to come in and say, I've never had to turn out IP before. I've never had to translate a project, translate a piece of work.
Yeah.
I need to learn, right?
And I can tell you, IP is hard.
It's hard.
It's, I've had, I had two unsuccessful patents. When we finally got a successful patent, what a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Because we wrote this beautiful thing, and then the idiots at the patent office were saying, oh, this has all been done before. And it's like, no, it hasn't. And all the examples they gave were all wrong.
Yeah.
And so we had to spend all this time rebutting them. And we finally won, but we were told, the lawyers told us, oh, they just do that all the time because it looks good for their metrics.
Yeah.
And they'll always cave once you give them anything.
Yeah.
But what a pain.
What a pain.
And I have another patent in there. It's been in there for 4 years now.
Great.
And they haven't done anything with it.
Yeah.
We're still waiting.
I mean, the other side of this coin is, right, we have to uphold our end of the bargain as scientists to do the work. We need the bureaucracy that be to also recognize, hey, if we want to get these things out into the market, we have to be able to move it through this process faster.
Right.
In order for companies to be interested, in order to spin off businesses.
We had another guest a few weeks ago who was suggesting that we spend a little more time with our students, teaching and giving them assignments to use the patent database to understand how companies protect their IP.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting point because we don't do anything with that right now.
Yeah, Dr. Taub, because in his former life he was the vice president of GM. He actually did a few seminars with his group. He sat down. He's like, "Hey, today we're going to talk about IP." And he's cutthroat, right? So he's telling us about the strategies they use when they see something they like. They patent everything around it and they choke out this business until they can't grow. And he's like, and then we strike and we buy their IP. So there's you have to protect yourself. You have to know what your work. Make sure your work is safe and you can reap the benefits of it somehow.
So there's another very cutthroat landscape, which is, of course, the wasteland that is social media.
Sure.
But it is potentially a very valuable avenue for getting the word out about research as well.
Yeah.
So is that something that you think about in this line of work of helping researchers understand, here's how you could use a podcast, for example, but start a TikTok or whatever it might be in order to find ways to reach the public directly and not have to go through traditional media routes.
Yeah, you're getting to there's probably some discussion to be had about is the juice worth the squeeze for that, right? Even if you put in all this effort to do it, will people still engage with it? What is the thing that makes people want to engage? I'll also say, if you can find a group of a dozen professors that want to start a TikTok, let me know.
Okay.
I think you'll be hard pressed to find those. But I understand what you're saying, right? This is who is the intended audience of the work. I would still argue that traditional publications, things like Popular Mechanics, Popular Science, right? That's what I read when I was a kid, and that's what got me interested, right? That was what, Scientific American, right? These are great publications that I think still serve the purpose they're supposed to, and I think they still get people engaged with science in a way that like they might read about something very cool, and like that's what sets them off on their path.
Yeah, that's actually something that I'm teaching right now in my lab class is writing for magazines.
Yeah.
Because they are still a valuable way to reach the public, and they are still something that a lot of people engage with, especially people who are just amateur curious about a topic. Popular science is still popular.
Yeah, right.
It's not just the title, right? It's actually a thing. But they do a lot with video and with the animations and all that that are just more attuned to the way the public consumes information in 2026.
Yes, I will say, I mean, I never had a chance to play around with Blender in grad school, but I knew a bunch of people who were Blender pros, and they would show me these videos of, hey, like I think about some work that was being done in Dr. Misser's lab by Ben Derby, right? He was making these really cool lattices, and he would show me these pictures that were all like, he colored them blue and yellow for Michigan, and he'd show all these atoms depositing and forming these crazy structures, and like being able to see it in real time while he's talking. Like, I don't care what you're talking about, this looks cool as hell, like, and so I think like those tools, like you're saying, right, they can be so useful and helpful, right? A picture says is worth 1,000 words. I don't know how much a video is worth, but it's got to be a lot more.
A million?
It might be. So we're now, we've been doing this podcast for 3 years, and I think it's time for us to start mining our podcast for shorts.
Yeah.
For YouTube shorts, for TikTok videos, and just sitting here listening to you made me realize, why don't we take all 60 origin stories and cut them out?
That'd be fun.
And make a weekly TikTok of people telling
how
why
I
they
became a
went-
scientist.
how they became- That might be a fun channel to start. And we've already captured all the data. We just have to go back and mine it.
And the I'm sure any of your guests give you good sound bites, right? Hey, I got a piece of advice. Hey, I did this thing, right?
Right.
Pull those out. I really
Exactly.
like those videos, right? When there's just two people talking, it's got the text underneath it. It looks nice, it's
Right. And, we use DaVinci Resolve, so it's very easy to get
Yeah.
that stuff under there. But, the purpose of our podcast is to help with materials education. And that includes, helping faculty teach better, but it also includes talking to students and helping them learn better.
Yeah.
And so, hearing your advice is just fantastic for students because everyone's path is different. And everyone's path is the right path.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to hear somebody exploring and not holding back. And if you don't like something, change it.
Yeah.
What a great thing to hear about.
Yeah. Speaking of making changes, I heard you have this side gig. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
I have a little bit of a side gig, because I don't work hard enough, right? Let's pick up some more work. No, this is another very interesting project that like just came about from things I'm interested in and things I'm passionate about. I worked with you when I was in graduate school.
That was a minute ago.
That was a minute ago. We won't say how many minutes, but I loved doing those courses, right? I loved being the TA. I got some very funny reviews during those courses. There was one review that stood out with me where they said, I can't tell if he's mad at me or quiet, which I thought was very funny because I knew what class they were referring to. It was like a day where they were working on reports, and I was like waiting for them to ask questions. If you have questions, come up. I was up at the front playing video games on my laptop and like being very frustrated by it. I was playing like a strategy game, so I think they saw me like.
And you thought it was a reaction.
Yeah, but all that being said, right, I love that course because especially the capstone projects and like watching students work through problems and like there's not enough joy in the world. There's nothing that I get more joy from than like seeing a student get an aha moment of like I understand something, I see it click. And when I was at Sandia, me and my advisor at the time, so again, Dr. Larico Treadwell, current mentor, current business partner, we both also enjoyed that process, right? We still enjoyed mentoring, we still enjoyed working with younger students, and it gets a little harder, right? When you get to a national lab, you're not set up necessarily like a university. But then the other thing that we also were very passionate about at the time is like, how do we increase access to students? How do we get more people involved in science in national labs where maybe they wouldn't have had these opportunities before? I always sort of think about it as I'm a good scientist. I'm not the best of the best, but I'm good and I'm passionate and I work hard. But to get to where I am today, it took somebody taking a chance on me and giving me an opportunity. And so what can I do to give an opportunity to somebody that maybe doesn't have the right mentors in place or didn't go to a private school and was already, I knew people at my high school whose parents were professors at Vanderbilt and they got me internships. It's all about this who you know problem.
Right.
And when we were at Sandia, they were doing this evaluation of the workforce. And at the time, they were looking around and they said, why is it that we only have 1% of our staff is black, 1% of our technical staff?
Right.
And only takes a little bit of digging. You talk to the administrators and say, all right, where are you recruiting from?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we're recruiting from Stanford and Georgia Tech and Iowa State. And you go, well, that's part of your problem, right?
Yeah.
The vast majority of your black engineers are coming from HBCUs. We have a wildly robust HBCU infrastructure here in the country. And so we developed a program called Start HBCU, which was importantly a research and relationship first approach to recruitment. So it was, we have research problems, you have capabilities. Let's work on this together. Let's put in proposals, find a way to work. As part of this deal, we're not only building our collaboration and we're making our network stronger, it's just a natural facilitator for internship exchange. If you can get an intern to a national lab, their chances of getting full-time employment there, through the roof. Sure. Their chances of getting into a great grad school, through the roof. And so now you've given somebody who maybe would have been passed over because the recruiters aren't going there, they have that opportunity now.
You bet.
And now they're getting to that next level, they can turn around and give that opportunity to someone else. So it's a bit of a self-perpetuating cycle. And so I left the lab, I went on to KLA, and in the meantime, Rico continued to do some of this work, but he extended it to helping some of his collaborators at HBCUs work on grants, because there's a bit of I guess maybe an Ouroboros here, or it's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle where faculty at HBCUs are, professors are stretched thin as it is, right? It doesn't matter where you are. Right? You guys are asked to do a lot, wear a lot of hats. You're supposed to mentor, you're supposed to teach, you're supposed to do research, you're supposed to present, you're supposed to be a chair, you're supposed to be on committees, all this type of stuff. HBCUs, those resources that you might have at a place like Michigan, stretched even thinner.
Right.
And so the expectation that this professor who's teaching 5 classes in one semester, because that's all the faculty they have, is also going to be sitting down to write a early career award or sit down to write a DOE Energy Frontiers Research Center grant, let alone have the time to make the connections, all these things, it doesn't add up. And there's a difference between working hard and just not even having the time available to work, right? Because you have to deal with these other things in front of you. And so he said, hey, let me help you. We'll work on some grants. We'll write them together. Through this process, he also learned that, not only do they not have the time, they oftentimes don't have the literal administration they need to help them put in the grants, invoice the grants, handle budgets. There was one school that he began to work with. They'd won an NSF award, a big NSF award. But because they didn't have the infrastructure set up to handle that budget, it never got invoiced and the money lapsed, which is terrible. What a waste, right? And so after a little bit of time building some of these connections, building out his network, he left Sandia and he started a company called E4 Power, which stands for Educate, Engage, Elevate, Empower. And our main cause right now is to really strengthen the research infrastructure and research capacity of HBCUs and emerging research institutions. Mm-hmm. So I was a postdoc for him. He called me on the phone. He said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I don't know what's going to happen. You want to work with me on it? I said, this sounds great. This sounds awesome. Right. So started just working on it a little bit. As we've gone through the years, I've begun to dedicate more and more time to it. My technical title is the Director of Pre-Award Services for the company. So I handle a lot of things as far as looking for grants. I have a number of clients that I handle directly. I help people ideate. I help people write whatever services they need. I'm sort of there, and I have a team of people that I work with to put out grants. But in the last year in particular has been a great year of growth for us as far as building partnerships. We are not the only grant consulting company out there, right? There's lots of companies that do this. But what we are really passionate about, what we really care about is we want you to win, but we're not going to say no to working with an organization if they don't want to go after the biggest grant or their rate of winning is low. We want to be there to invest our time and work with these organizations to lift them up. So our business model is small upfront fee, because chances are if you are Alabama A&M or you are Toulouse University, small research institutions, you might not have the funds to pay for something really large, right, to sustain that. Small one-time fee to cover some of our administration, and then when you win, we win. We take a small cut of what you win. We put ourselves on as evaluators, or we work as administrators on the back end. But this model is something that people are very interested in. It's something they take to because they can see that we care and that we want to be there to help, to do whatever we can to build out this infrastructure. And then on the other end, we're beginning to get interest from the government, right? We've put in some white papers to NSF, to the Navy, to NASA, because we're sort of solving we're solving a problem for the universities, right? They need research funds because research funds bring in students. When you graduate students go on to get internships and jobs, and it builds up your reputation, it builds up your research infrastructure. The other problem we're having is we are, as a country, approaching a very sharp cliff where, depending on what number you choose and what study you look at, over the next 10 years, we are going to have a vacancy of 1 to 3 million STEM jobs, right? There's just no other way about it. And in particular, for things that are of interest for national defense, we don't have enough domestic STEM talent.
Right.
You know where there's a lot of domestic STEM talent? HBCUs. Overwhelmingly domestic students, overwhelmingly well-trained. There just needs to be a little bit more of an investment and an interest or a way to work with these schools. And when we talk to government organizations, they're like, how do we do this? How do we engage with them? How do we find these students? So we're working on some pathways with some other partners to have better infrastructure for the government to work with these schools and work with these students in order to maximize the domestic STEM pipeline. So that's sort of the other backwards problem we're solving as well. And it's been incredibly interesting work so far. That work, I love doing it because the impact is very tangible to me. And kind of circling back to, how did I get to where I am? It was opportunity and it was resources I had available to me. So let me do what I can. If I'm not physically teaching people or mentoring them, let me find another way to give back in that way and provide an opportunity for somebody that maybe wouldn't have gotten it otherwise.
That's fascinating. We had a podcast guest early in our podcast who's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
You might even know him. He was the chairman of the physics department at Morehouse, and then he went to Morgan State.
Who's this?
Willie Rockford.
Oh, yeah.
And now Willie's the dean of engineering
Yes.
at Alabama A&M.
Yes.
And so when you said Alabama A&M, I figured you probably knew Willie.
Yeah.
And he is quite the individual.
Yes.
And so I have an REU program, which is a physics REU.
Yeah.
And we've always recruited heavily at the AUC in Atlanta. And, you're right. You give students like that a chance to work in a world-class lab. Bam, they get into all the graduate schools.
Yeah.
We just had one, Rachel Goldman just graduated, a student who went on my REU.
Nice.
And he's now working for Dow Chemical as a Ph.D. And what a great guy. And I think what you're doing is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I wonder if you could expand it to connect some of the students that will be helped by these research programs with some of the schools like Michigan or MIT or Stanford to help drive the pipeline a little further, because it's one thing to get the money there. It's another thing to get them to actually do good work so they can get the next proposal. But then you also want to have a pipeline to get the students into the STEM workforce.
Yeah. And I mean, you're also a problem that is it's also good for universities to have domestic students as well.
Absolutely.
Because if you want to collaborate with a national lab and you say, hey, all of my grad students are foreign nationals, it makes it a lot trickier and a lot harder. And because if you're putting in a proposal with National Labs and you have a domestic student, they can go to that facility, they can work there, they can get that hands-on experience, right? That's great for them, great for you too, right?
Well, and that's one of our strengths at Michigan. We have a much higher domestic to international ratio than most, other schools.
Yeah.
It's the same at Stanford and Berkeley. They've got that, but now with a lot of money coming from defense, we have to worry about it even more.
Yeah.
So I'm like taking CUI courses.
Yeah.
Controlled unclassified information. And what a pain, but it's important.
Yeah.
And you can't get certain contracts if you don't have that. And of course, all the students have to be U.S. citizens.
But your point about getting students to grad school. So one of the things that we are trying to do as part of our work right now, because you have to make sure that pipeline continues, right? It doesn't just stop at undergrad. Tim and I actually had a little bit of a conversation at lunch today about the merit of the PhD, right? Do we have too many PhDs? That's a question for another time. And masters are still valuable. Things like that. You want students to have the options to go to the best places.
Right.
So we are doing a lot of starting with that relationship building with, all right, who's in your immediate area? Like that's where we're starting first. So for example, Southern University, it's the ag school for LSU. Yeah. How do we make sure that when we're building out research programs, it's one thing to leverage a relationship with Michigan and say, hey, we want to build out a collaboration which drives pipelines and internships. LSU's right in the backyard. They got all the resources and facilities we need, world-class school as well. Let's start with that. So that's like a little bit of a the regional partner model is working well for us. But I think we can continue offline.
But that's fraught with some problems.
Yes,
too.
yeah. I mean,
I won't say this on a public forum, but there are some universities, powerhouse universities next to a really good HBCU, and the powerhouse university abuses the HBCU by always running to them for their broader impacts, never telling them until the last minute, and then never really sending any money to the institution. And that's not good either.
And one of the things we're trying to do there, right, is like if we are able to make sure that these HBCUs are the primes. Yeah. So the broader impact is we're doing good work. Yes. It's not who you bring to the table. And so when you flip the order, that's really what we're interested in trying to do.
So that's what I wanted to ask about, because this relationship building problem is so complex because there are bad actors and there is history of institutions not being treated appropriately. And in something like a startup situation with E4, is that an advantage or a disadvantage to sort of be a fresh player, right? Because starting a relationship from zero is hard, but maybe there's also not sort of a prior assumption of whether you're acting in good faith for the institutions that you're partnering with. So how does that relationship building process work for a situation like yours?
Yeah, I mean, all of our work starts with relationships, right? There is no world in which you can do research without starting from relationships, right? It has to come from there, and people can tell, right? When you're. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
No, you're not, because we write it's not explicit.
There you go. They can tell when you're bull crapping them,
Sure.
And I think, at least for us, we let our work speak for ourselves, and we let our previous partners speak for us. We've helped certain schools get their first NSF proposals, right? Their first pieces of federal funding, right? We are doing what we can to position these institutions. We're hopefully they don't really need us anymore, right? The problem with a company like us is if we do too good of a job,
you make yourself obsolete.
We make ourselves obsolete.
Right.
But
so, are you going to like the NSBE conference? And
yes,
I've been very involved because it's a physics REU. I've been very involved with the National Society of Black Physicists. I've got great students at that conference. That conference is in big trouble, as is NSBE, because of a lot of external political nonsense. We're supposed to host National Society of Black Physicists meeting in the fall, but they haven't given us the green light, and it's really late. And they're doing it with the National Society of Hispanic Physicists. And those would be, when those start running more regularly, what a great place for you to set up a table, because all the faculty from HBCUs show up to those things with their students.
Oh, yeah.
And
No, we are already having a presence at these places. So we, I haven't had a chance to really sing the praises of Rico, the CEO, my mentor, former PI. This guy's incredible. He is strong-willed, hardworking as they come. He's the kind of guy, he's calling me at midnight, hey, we just got a new proposal, we're putting it in. All right, let's do it. Like, let's rock it, right? He's I don't know where he is at any given moment because he's flying to schools, he's talking to deans, he's talking to vice deans, he's talking to presidents, he's talking to industry. He's really building out an incredible organization here. But it also just so happens that he just got voted, he's the president-elect of Novachet as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a presence there, and we are building our presence at these other places. We were just at Bea. One of actually the very cool things we just did is we were at Bea and in partnership with an organization called AMI. Are you familiar with AMI?
No.
They're an organization that's like a engineering society that represents the 17 ABET accredited engineering HBCUs.
Huh. Okay.
We ran a program with them doing, they ran some capstone projects, but part of the deliverable for them was, one of the other things that makes E4 unique is we have IP lawyers on staff. We have MBAs on staff. We have tax accountants on staff. We have CPCs on staff, or PMPs on staff. So we're a bit of a one-stop shop. Do everything you need. We filed provisional patents for the students.
Wow.
As a part of this, as a part of this design project.
Cool.
So we are really trying to make sure that we have an impact. But I think your point about the conferences is felt. Bea was noticeably smaller than the year before that. The career fair is smaller. Presence is smaller. It's
Right.
tough.
And the students present their research at their institutions, but because most of it isn't funded,
Yeah.
they have no money to go to the conference.
Yeah.
And so they raise money to bring like 600 students to
Yeah.
the conference. And it's so important because the students need to see
Yeah.
that there are people who look like them
Yeah.
who are really successful. They
Yeah.
bring in top names of people like Jim Gates from MIT,
Yeah.
the famous physicist, and so on. And it's an incredible thing to go to these conferences.
And I mean, and not only that, I mean, it's I think by the end of conference week, I'm pretty tired, and I'm pretty tired of listening to talks and listening to posters, but you can't help but be a little inspired by being in this building with, I turn right, there's this guy had a, recent cover of Nature. I turn left, this guy had the recent cover of Advanced Materials, right? How could you not be like,
Oh, I know.
awe-inspired, right?
It's
And
great.
what I always really enjoy is going to the poster sessions because I think as we get older, sometimes it's easy to get a little jaded about the work you do, and it's like, why am I doing this? Why does this matter? But you talk to a second-year grad student or an undergrad about their poster. They worked so hard on it. They've done this research, and they're like, they love it, right? They're talking about it. And you're like, this is why it's interesting. This is
Right.
great. Like it gives me new ideas. It breathes new life into like what I'm doing. So I that's why I like coming to these conferences too.
I just wish it didn't cost so much.
Listen, if you don't hold it in San Diego, it'll cost a lot less.
I know.
I was talking yesterday, right? Like, if you go into some of these conference rooms, they're maybe not, fully attended. Yeah, your conference is in San Diego. People are probably out at the beach. Hold your conference in, Toledo or something.
Well,
Do it in
okay,
Toledo.
let's not get too crazy here.
Hold it in Michigan in the middle of the winter. Nobody's going outside. They're going to be inside.
They're going to move this back to Las Vegas,
Yeah.
which kind of disappoints me because
Yeah.
although it's cheaper, you end up smelling like a cigarette.
Yeah.
It's like walking through an ashtray. It's ugh.
Yeah. But even though the funding or the expense is part of the problem, funding is part of the solution. And that's just back to what you were saying about these trends in attendance. If organizations like yours can help to bring more financial resources to these institutions,
Right.
then they gain the ability to increase their attendance, their representation, ultimately their productivity and engagement at events like this.
Yeah,
So
it all snowballs,
it's really
right?
great to have the opportunity to reverse that trend and make things move upward again.
I think I hit a record at this meeting. I bought a Diet Pepsi and it was $6.
See, the difference is I didn't buy the Diet Pepsi and I didn't spend $6. But that's the power of being cheap.
Yeah. No, it is.
Last night at our reception, I bought a $14 beer.
Was it good?
It was good.
Was it $14 good?
It was a good 14. Yes, it
Oh
was.
no, I met my Uber driver from the airport. I was asking about living in San Diego, and he said, "Well, I've maxed out my third credit card just to pay to live here." And I said, "Why don't you move?" And he said, "Well, it's really nice here." It's okay. Hey man,
I went to a conference in San Jose and I took an Uber from the airport down there. My Uber driver had this brand new electric vehicle, but he had a master's in computer science, 7 years experience at a software company, and he got laid off because of AI. And it's crazy. And now our computer science department, they dropped 150 students dropped out of computer science at the beginning of this year for that reason. This is good for materials because we're getting a lot of those students because we can't be replaced by AI.
I don't know. Some other companies would disagree.
Not if you're used to.
You have to. Yeah, this is I don't know how off topic or how in depth you want to go on this topic too, right? That's it's not an existential threat for us, but it is very interesting.
It's a force that is going to need adapting to.
Yeah, there's our director, former director, at a all hands gave a quote that I thought was very poignant. He said, "AI is not going to make people obsolete; it's going to make people who don't use AI obsolete."
Yes.
That's and right. I don't know. I got into a debate with one of my colleagues the other day because he was like, "Hey, I'm putting together this proposal, and last night I plugged the prompt and topic with a little more detail into ChatGPT Pro, and it turned out this great literature review, it summarized all the problems, you should read it." And I was sort of I pushed back. I was like, "How are you gonna the literature review is you spend all this time and you learn how to do it and you go through it." And he said, "Yeah, but you don't need to do it anymore.
No.
Why would you do it?"
Right.
And so,
well, this is the fundamental question that I pose to my students all the time in class is the purpose of this activity the process or the product?
Right.
If the process is the point of doing it, don't skip the process. Yeah. If what you need is the result, get to the result and move on with your life. And we need to be more mindful than ever about making that distinction of why we do the things we do. Yeah. But that's a story for another time.
Yeah, right.
You brought up posters. There's a poster session. I'd like to go see it.
Yeah.
And, enjoy the undergrads being excited about their first research presentation. Yeah. So we should probably wrap this up.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I guess I'll make a quick plug. If anybody wants to see what's going on with E4 Power, e4power.org is our website. If you're interested in the Applied Physics Lab, you can also reach me on LinkedIn. If you're in the DMV area and you're interested in the IP conference, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Our registration page should be going live at the end of the week.
Yep, and we'll have links for those in the show notes as well, so you can get that right there.
If you give them to us.
Yeah, I'll give them to you.
And there it is.
But thank you guys so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Yep. Nice to reconnect.
It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Yeah. And for everyone else out there on the internet, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Undercooled.